Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's presentation, which is the fourth presentation in the series, we're going to go ahead and talk about the track plan for the layout. Taken the last week or so to go through some choices of different track plans that I put together, and I found a track plan online that I think is actually a great fit for the layout, so we're going to talk about that as well. If you haven't checked out the previous three presentations, I highly encourage you to do that. That'll kind of give you a rundown of the layout planning process, and then that'll lead into the track design that we're going to talk about today. So, last presentation we left off with these self-reflection questions, which I talked about. Thought about these answers a little bit more, and I think pretty much everything has stayed the same from last week, talking about the layout room and if it was utilized to its fullest potential with the configuration I had of the bench work and so forth. And I think that I have utilized it to its fullest potential. In the benchwork style, nothing has changed there. I do want to stick with the U-shaped layout. And then the last question, the planned elements, are they a good fit? And I got some feedback, and I think that they are. I think that the ceramic pellet manufacturer and the team track are going to work well together for the layout. So let's move on to the track design. So the track plan. Just to reiterate from some earlier presentations, the track plan has to satisfy my desires, and I also want it to tell the railroad's story. So from the previous presentation, I talked about how it's going to be a very short line, half-mile, modern industrial scene. It's going to include 2 customers and an interchange. It needs to include a classification yard or classification tracks. And the biggest thing is that this layout has to be operations focused. So the big question: design the layout from scratch or use a pre-made design? So I originally came up with a design from scratch. It was pretty much an ingle nook. Had 2 turnouts. It was pretty simple, but it was effective. There was a spur for each industry, the ceramic pellet manufacturer, and one for the team track. And then there was another one for the interchange. And it actually worked pretty well. And from an operational standpoint, this could still satisfy my desires and would work prototypically and work well for operations. However, I found a design online that I really loved, and that is Lance Mindheim's free money layout. On his blog, he calls it the free money layout. And basically it's called that because of the industries that are on there. It's a logistics warehouse and a team track, and pretty much it's free money because the railroad only has to manage a couple of spurs and can have multiple customers renting the same track. It's a great concept. However, I don't want to use a logistics warehouse. I think it's a great industry, but I want to replace that with the ceramic pellet manufacturer. So this design fits my layout criteria that we talked about in earlier presentations. The U-shaped design has the 2 industries and the interchange, classification tracks or yard, and it has broader curves, which I think is really important, and it also works for the modern era. Now, this plan is 10 foot by 10 foot, which is a little bit larger than the space that I have, but it can definitely be modified slightly to fit in my space. Here's a design that I did to fit into my 9 foot by 8.5 foot space. So my design includes microengineering code 70 track. I did 27-inch radius curves on this design, as opposed to the 24-inch radius curves that he did on his, or Lance Mindheim did on his. It's got number 6 turnouts, and there's 3 distinct areas. So you've got the yard with a team track, you've got the interchange, and then central products is the key scene. And I placed central products in this corner because that's where the doorway is. So when people walk into the layout room, this is going to be the first scene that they see. And central products is the owner of the industrial railroad that I'm going to be modeling. So I thought it was very important to make that the first thing that people see when they come into the layout room. So just a little bit of a side note here. I had a viewer who watched a previous presentation ask about interchanges, and I just wanted to discuss the interchange here real quick for them. So basically the interchange is represented with a simple spur on this plan, and a lot of plans as well. So basically all it involves, and you can pretty much treat it like an industry, but all it involves is bringing cars in and bringing cars back out. So you just simulate that by essentially starting your ops session by placing a few cars on the interchange track, and then you'll pull those and you can bring them to the yard or bring them to the industry, whatever you want to do. And then the cars that you've pulled from those industries or from the yard that are leaving the layout or leaving the world that you've created will go back on the interchange, and you'll go ahead and you'll just pick those up off, set them on a shelf, set them out of the way, and repeat the operation. So that's pretty much how it goes when you want to simulate an interchange. You can do it other ways. Bigger layouts obviously do it a little bit better. They can have multiple tracks, or they can have two actual railroads that they're modeling on the layout itself and actually exchange the cars in the real world, or like the real world. But with a small layout like this, that's not something that you can do. So you just use a simple spur, like in this plan here, to simulate that. So hopefully that helps. Now, some things that I wanted to consider modifying. I thought about maybe reducing the 27-inch radius to 24-inch, and this would allow me to extend the yard tracks a little bit. Right now, with the current design and the 27-inch radius curves, I can only hold about 3, maybe 4 pieces of rolling stock, depending on the length. Some of the rolling stock, like the slurry tanks, are a little bit shorter, so I could hold 3 to 4 on the runaround, whereas the original design by Lance can hold more. So by reducing the radius, I can extend the yard and also the industrial tracks for Central products. So this is something I talked about in the previous presentation, but shortening the right leg of the layout. I'm a little iffy on this. I think I can get away with doing a full 8 feet, but I'm not exactly sure. I think I'm going to have to actually construct the first leg, the other leg of the layout, and see how that lines up and how much space that's actually going to take. It's going to be a little bit of a tight squeeze, so I need to make sure that'll work. And then the last change I could possibly make is to straighten the interchange track. I put it at a curve just to make it a little bit more interesting, kind of hide in the trees, but straightening it would certainly allow easier coupling. You can see that I did leave a small straight section before it curves to allow to uncouple more easily, but I am contemplating making it a full straight section. Now with that, it'll be a little bit shorter, but it should still be able to hold the 3 to 4 cars, the same amount that can be found on the yard tracks. Now let's talk about operations. So according to Lance, his original plan could hold 4 to 5 cars in the yard and 4 to 5 cars at the main industry in the interchange. Now this will be reduced again to 3 to 4, so there will be approximately 8 cars or so on the layout that can be moved around, and of course I can swap these out with other rolling stock that's off the layout. Now it's pretty simple for operations, but in summary, you sort the cards in the yard, it's not the cards, the cars in the yard, according to the industry. Then you shove those loads to the warehouse and swap for empties. You return those empties back to the yard, and then you work the interchange or the team track and swapping the inbounds with outbounds before returning to the yard. Now it's important to note that not every industry or car spot at these industries is going to be swapped every time, so there will be a little bit of variety there, which I think is really interesting. Now this is kind of a summary of some other things I wanted to focus on for operations. But basically, the Prescott Central trackage is going to fall under Rule 93, which is yard limits. This will allow some restrictions, speed restrictions and that sort of thing, but I also don't have to worry about signaling. It's going to be the one train moving across the tracks at a slow speed, and it'll allow me to focus on other aspects of operation. So again, there's dark territory, no signals. There's going to be track warrants for the interchange, or possibly using Mother May I, which is essentially just asking for permission. There's no real dispatch, but I may want to go with that approach. I also want to use a proto throttle. I have not used one other than for about 30 seconds at the Springfield train show. I tried it and I loved it, so I definitely want to have one for the layout. It'll also slow things down a little bit, which I think is important. And then this, crossing bucks with road flares versus an operational railroad crossing. This will also slow things down a bit, and Lance Mindheim actually uses road flares for his operations, and I think that's a fantastic detail. So I think this is the way I want to go with that. Now I put a question mark for the next one, but switch lists or car cards and waybills. I've used both. I currently have car cards made up, ready to be made up, I should say. But I think a switch list might be more appropriate for a layout of this size. I might try both, see which one I like better, and then go from there. But this is going to be one of the options that I choose from. Now, something I was going to include on my previous layout, or I did, but I didn't have a chance to use, was switch locks for the turnouts. or to simulate a switch lock. There's only one location on this layout that I would be able to use it, and that's the interchange, but I think that will also slow things down. It'll enhance the operations and give the conductor an additional task to complete. And then the last thing is timed tasks. So handbrakes, coupling hoses, all this sort of stuff that you don't really see, or can't really model very well, but just adding in that time, that's going to slow things down and make things more prototypical. So that's all I have for you on that presentation. Pretty straightforward. I am still going back and forth a little bit on designs, but I think that that particular design from Lance is just perfect for what I want to do. I think it's going to be interesting. It's very prototypical, and I think it's going to work really, really well overall. If I do decide to change things, I'll certainly make another presentation, but for now, that is the plan. So obviously, step 1, we created the plan. Step 2, we created the design, and step 3, build the design. I've already gone ahead and purchased those IKEA Ivar shelves, got them partially assembled. I'm going to finish that up this week, and then I'm going to start building the layout. I don't think I'm going to do a 5th presentation. I think I've got everything here that I need, but if there's anything that you think should be included, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.